Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Arkhangelske and Keramik Kalinova area. As you can see, we have a lot of updates, a lot of icons that tell us some interesting information. First, let's talk about the most important updates that are coming from the line Kalinova and Keramik. These two villages that located very close to each other. During the previous night we have few geolocations of how the Russians were bombing and attacking this territory with significant number of aviation bombs, with artillery strikes and so on. Most likely those were something like artillery preparation, aviation preparation before further offensive operation. And later, mostly by the beginning of this morning, we start receiving significant updates that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over, let's say, southern part of Kalinova, not southern but southeastern part of Kalinova. So that information was provided us by the pro-Russian, let's say, mapper by the name of Ribor. I believe you're familiar with him. So this, according to him, this area was already under Russian control by the beginning of the morning. So everything that located to the south of Solovyove Strait. Significant progress, obviously, and but those were not the only reports from the situation from this area. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians managed to break through the, let's say, defense belt along the Solovyove Strait and enter the northern part of, let's say, the eastern part of Keramik and to enter Keramik central part itself. So according to pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, that was approximately the area of Russian control by the beginning of this morning. And later, right before I start making the video, very reliable Russian sources reported and confirmed that as a result of very heavy clashes, the Russians established complete control over the village by the name of Keramik. So most likely, for now without geolocations, without video confirmations, but most likely as a result of clashes, very heavy offensive operation, the Russians established complete control over Keramik, and that means that the Ukrainians are about to get in a cauldron. Everything as we discussed yesterday, the Russians will try to encircle the Ukrainians in Kalinova, and among the fields it's very difficult to understand the number of forces that the Russians are able to do to, let's say, encircle. Maybe 200-300 of soldiers would be encircled. And now let's move to Arkhangelsk. Once again, the pro-Ukrainian mappers continue confirming the Russian progress, that most of the Arkhangelsk is already under Russian control. The pro-neutral mappers are saying that the Russians established control not just over Arkhangelsk, but furthermore moved further in direction of the town by the name of Arkhangelske. So the Russians established control over gardens. The Russians captured completely Arkhangelsk. So this is the progress according to pro-neutral and pro-Ukrainian mappers. But the Russians are saying that this morning the first assault troopers entered the town, the village by the name of Arkhangelske. And this is of course very significant progress. Yesterday the Russians captured the gardens, this one, and now the Russians, let's say, made first attempts to attack Arkhangelske from the southwest, and according to some sources without geolocated confirmations, the Russians entered Arkhangelske itself. And this is the cauldron. So this is already cauldron. If this information is confirmed that the Russians entered Arkhangelske and forced the Ukrainians to fall back to the north, that means that this is already a cauldron for Ukrainian forces who are currently located in this fortification area and the rest of Kalinova. Once again, we don't know for sure how many soldiers are there, but there are troopers of 115th Mechanized Brigade and the troopers of 23rd Mechanized Brigade. 200-300, obviously. Now let's move to the south in direction of Solovyove, and we have complete confirmed from the deep state pre-Ukrainian mappers that the Russians completely captured Solovyove and that the Russians established complete control over Semyonovka. The Ukrainians retreat, let's say, towards this artillery pocket that we discussed yesterday, and today the Russians published additional video how they managed to discover and to destroy another artillery system among the three lines in the area. The artillery systems that Ukrainians are no longer available to evacuate from the territory. Now let's move to Krasnogorovka, because very interesting updates we have discussed yesterday about the Russian progress in this area. And today, during the previous night, we haven't received anything confirming this information or not. The only thing we got is some reports from pro-neutral mappers like Syria confirming that yes, the Russians managed to establish control over the territory. So very interesting updates, very interesting advances of the Russian armed forces, and obviously the Russians today will continue moving further to the west with the purpose also to encircle encircle the Ukrainians in Krasnogorovka. Now we are moving to the north, to Kupiansk direction, to northern Kupiansk direction, because the Russians intensify their activity on the direction as well. Very interesting updates are coming from Kyslivka agglomerations. During the previous night, first we got just the video of how the Russians were bombing the railway station, the building the Ukrainian fortifications along the railways, and after that we start receiving updates that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, the West group has broken through the defenses and is conducting assault operations in Kharkiv region, occupying almost half of the village Kyslivka. And later, the pro-Ukrainian mappers, Deep State, confirmed that piece of information, telling us that the Russians did manage to break through and to establish control over first streets of the village. So approximately this is the current situation in the village. The Ukrainian Territory Defense Brigade were forced to fall back. They couldn't, resist under the Russian pressure. And if the situation is confirmed, if the Russians are able to repel any upcoming Ukrainian counterattack, then of course the Ukrainian positions in Kotlarovka to the south will be completely collapsed and will not be able to hold under the Russian pressure. So if the situation confirms, once again, most likely during the next 24-48 hours, this territory will be also captured by the Russians, and during the next additional 24-48 hours, the Russians will capture everything that located between the railways that goes to Kupiansk. This is the railways, and between the road and 26. So this small foothold will be captured with the rich network of the fortifications. So of course, significant progress. Maybe the Russians have already started their greatest offensive operation. For now, we don't have enough of information to make these conclusions. Maybe that was something like a secondary attack with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to redeploy additional reinforcements. Meanwhile, the Russians are still preparing for the primary attack. Furthermore, we continue receiving second day in a row updates that the Russians continue bombing and destroying the pontoon bridges along Oskol River. Few additional bridges were destroyed. The Russians trying to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities to redeploy additional reinforcements, reserves and munition. Now let's move to global Ukrainian update, because during the previous night the Russians conducted massive missile strike all over the entire territory of Ukraine. The Russians were using significant number of missiles of different types, which most important, the Russians were using Ha-101-555, the Russians were using Kinzhal, the Russians were using Iskander, Ha-59, Ha-69, the Russians were using calibers, and as you can see, the Russians have used calibers for the first time during the massive use of calibers for the first time during the previous half a year, most likely, and the Russians were using the S-300 missiles. This is the map of explosions. The explosions took place in Dnipro, Kharkiv, western part of Ukraine, Lvov, Ivano-Frankovsk, Zhytomyr. Significant number of areas where under very heavy fire. The Ukrainians stated that they managed to bring down significant number of missiles, more than 60-70%. But regarding the Ukrainian numbers, we have the map of Russian strikes, and as you can see, most of the arrows were going to the western part of Ukraine, mainly in direction of Ivano-Frankovska Burштynska power plant. This is the power plant that the Russians were trying to destroy, and according to information we have, the power plant left the chat. The Russians destroyed it, and this is the third or fourth power plant in a row that was destroyed by the Russians. Also, this situation will cause significant problem for Ukrainians and for Ukrainian economy. Now let's discuss a few things about mobilization. The Ukrainians are planning to start building the checkpoints all over the entire territory of Ukraine, where we can find 2 military soldiers and 2 recruit personals. And also we have reports that the Ukrainians are sending significant recruiters to Kiev. Kiev wasn't, bothered by mobilization process, haven't been bothered by mobilization process since the beginning of the special military operation. So there are lots of men who can serve in army, and now there are around 2,000-3,000 of recruiters, and during the next few days Kiev will be covered by this process and significant number of soldiers will be sent to the training centers. But meanwhile, we still continue receiving updates how Ukrainians running away from Ukraine. We see a very big group of Ukrainians who managed to cross the border and to run for their lives on the territory of Hungary. Very happy and managed to save their lives. So this is the situation. This is the Ukraine of 21st century. And that's it for today, for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.